November 18th, 1978. This date is burned into history, a chilling reminder. It marks one of the largest mass deaths in American history. Not from a natural disaster, no. This was a man-made horror, Jonestown. The name itself now whispers of manipulation. It speaks of innocence lost. It screams of a faith twisted into a death sentence. Over 900 souls perished that day. They died deep in the Guyanese jungle. So far from home, so far from hope. The world watched, aghast, as the story unfolded. How could such a thing happen? The question still echoes, even now, decades later. The architect of this tragedy was James Warren Jones, Jim Jones. He began not as a monster, but as a charismatic preacher. In the mid-1950s, he opened his first church in Indianapolis. It was a bold move, that one. His church was racially integrated. This was unusual, even radical for its time in America. Jones himself had no formal theological training at the start, but he possessed a raw, captivating power. He could speak. He could make people listen. He offered a vision of equality and community. Many were drawn to his progressive message, seeking solace and belonging. The small congregation grew. It became the People's Temple. In 1960, they affiliated with the Disciples of Christ. Jones was even ordained in that church in 1964. This gave him a cloak of legitimacy, a veneer of respectability. In the mid-1960s, Jones moved the temple to Northern California. He told his followers it was a safe haven. He preached that Ukiah, California, would be safe from a coming nuclear holocaust. Around 100 loyalists followed him. They left their lives behind. They trusted his vision implicitly. His hold was already tightening, you see. From Ukiah, the People's Temple expanded its reach. Jones opened a church in San Francisco in 1970, then another in Los Angeles by 1972. His influence soared. He attracted thousands. A large number were African Americans. They were disillusioned with the empty promises of society. Jones offered them something different. He performed supposed faith healings. He claimed powers of mind reading. He cultivated an image as a powerful, benevolent leader. Some politicians and members of the press even lauded his humanitarian efforts. But underneath, a darker current was already flowing, pulling them all towards the abyss. The move to Guyana was not a sudden decision. It was a calculated escape. By the mid-1970s, whispers were growing louder in California. Allegations of financial impropriety, stories of abuse within the temple. The media started to dig, to ask uncomfortable questions. Jones knew the walls were closing in, parang ganun. So, he unveiled his grand vision, a socialist utopia, an agricultural paradise in Guyana, South America. He called it the People's Temple Agricultural Project. Jonestown, it would be their sanctuary. Free from the racism and corruption of the United States, he promised. A fresh start, a new world. The establishment of Jonestown was an immense undertaking, Grabe. Followers were sent ahead into the dense Guyanese jungle. They cleared the land with their bare hands with sheer will. They built simple wooden cottages, a communal kitchen, a meeting hall. They planted crops. It was back-breaking labor, day in and day out. But for many, it was fueled by hope. Jones portrayed it as their collective achievement, their own land, their own society. They were pioneers, building a better world for their children, a place where everyone was equal, or so they were told. To the outside world, Jonestown was presented as a thriving, self-sufficient community, a model of cooperative living. Jones carefully managed its image. Visitors, when allowed, saw smiling faces and bountiful harvests. A U.S. Embassy cable from June 1978 even described Jonestown as exercising virtually total autonomy. It was remote, isolated. The Guyanese government, with its own challenges, largely left them alone. Jonestown ran its own affairs, its own services. It seemed like Jones had indeed carved out his own kingdom, far from prying eyes. But this kingdom was built on a foundation of control. The isolation was deliberate. It was a tool. Upon arrival, members' passports were confiscated. Letters were censored, both incoming and outgoing. Jones's voice, amplified by loudspeakers, became a constant presence. His sermons, his pronouncements, his paranoia echoed through the settlement 24/7. There was no escape from his message. The dream of a socialist paradise was slowly, insidiously morphing. It was becoming a prison disguised as a promised land. The seeds of the end were already sown deep in that Guyanese soil. The reality of daily life in Jonestown was a stark contrast to the utopian dream. It was a grim existence, Talaga. Followers toiled for long hours in the fields, often on insufficient food. Malnutrition became common. Medical care was basic, sometimes withheld, as punishment. Jones and his inner circle lived better, of course. The promised equality was a lie. Surveillance was constant. Everyone watched everyone else. Children were encouraged to report on their parents. Fear permeated the humid air, thicker than the jungle mist. This was not the sanctuary they had sacrificed everything for. Jones maintained his iron grip through a terrifying repertoire of manipulation. He orchestrated white nights. These were loyalty tests, emergency drills. Followers would be awakened in the middle of the night. They would be told Jonestown was under attack. They would be ordered to line up and drink what Jones claimed was poison. He wanted to see who was truly loyal. These were rehearsals for death. Public humiliations were common. Beatings were administered for minor infractions. Sleep deprivation and relentless indoctrination wore down their defenses, their ability to think critically. Psychological torment was Jones's specialty. He expertly exploited their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Family units were deliberately broken apart. Spouses were separated. Children placed in communal care. This was to ensure their primary loyalty was to him, not to each other. He convinced black members and other minorities that if they ever left the temple, they would be hunted down. They would be thrown into government concentration camps in America. He made them believe he was their only protector, their only hope. Their complete dependence was his ultimate goal. Eyewitness accounts from survivors paint a harrowing picture. Yolanda Williams, who managed to leave before the final tragedy, spoke of the constant control. She described the despair. People were trapped, literally and psychologically. They were thousands of miles from home. Their documents were gone. Their money was gone. Their families were fractured. Who could they turn to? Jones had systematically isolated them from the outside world and from each other. The weight of this oppressive atmosphere was crushing. The paradise had become a meticulously crafted prison, ruled by a charismatic madman. Hey Naku, the suffering was immense. In November 1978, a flicker of hope arrived. U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan of California traveled to Guyana. He came to investigate the persistent, troubling rumors, allegations of false imprisonment, claims of severe abuse within Jonestown. For some residents, Ryan's visit was a lifeline. A chance, perhaps their only chance, to escape the tightening noose. Jones, ever the performer, tried to manage the situation. He put on a show of welcome. He presented a carefully curated image of a happy, thriving community, but the tension was undeniable. It was electric, hanging heavy in the air. On November 18th, Congressman Ryan prepared to leave. Crucially, he planned to take several temple members with him. These were the defectors, those who had found the courage to say no more. This was an act Jones could not tolerate. His control was being challenged directly. As Ryan's delegation, including journalists and concerned relatives, reached the Port Kaituma airstrip, tragedy struck. Temple gunmen, dispatched by Jones, opened fire. It was an ambush. Congressman Ryan was murdered on that remote runway. 3 newsmen and one of the defectors were also killed. 11 others were wounded. The die was cast. There was no turning back now. Back in Jonestown, Jones gathered his flock. The news from the airstrip had reached him. He knew the outside world would soon descend. His paranoia reached its zenith. He announced it was time for revolutionary suicide. He told them the enemy would come. They would torture their children. They would destroy everything they had built. Death, he preached, was their only dignified escape. A large vat was filled with a fruit drink. It was laced with cyanide, Valium, and other sedatives. The children were first. Syringes were used to squirt the poison into the mouths of babies. The horror of that moment is unimaginable. The final act was swift, yet filled with agonizing terror and coerced compliance. Chilling audio recordings captured Jones's voice. He cajoled, threatened, and commanded his followers to drink. Some resisted, some wept. But the armed guards, the years of conditioning, the sheer hopelessness, it was too much. One by one, they drank. Over 900 people died. Jim Jones himself was found dead from a single gunshot wound, likely self-inflicted or by an aide. When Guyanese troops finally reached Jonestown, they found a scene of unbelievable devastation. A sea of bodies, silent in the jungle sun. The People's Temple was no more. But Jonestown's dark legacy, its chilling truth, endures as a stark warning.